The winds just about frost-free by tomorrow morning, I should suspect. But it is going to be a blustery start on Saturday morning. Most areas seeing a lot of cloud around and a risk of rain. Temperatures in the mid-single figures. Some potentially quite heavy rain across eastern areas of Scotland in particular. A drier morning to come for Northern Ireland. The winds will have eased after a very gusty evening this evening. But across parts of the south of Wales, southwestern England, potentially all across the English Channel coast, we will continue to see some very blustery and heavy showers throughout Saturday. So if you do get caught in one, it's going to be quite unpleasant. Now, there will be some breaks between the showers, and there is some drier weather on offer on Saturday, particularly across parts of Scotland, eastern Scotland by the afternoon. As I said, Northern Ireland seeing a slightly drier day, as well as some southern areas of England. Temperatures will be around 11 or 12 degrees. So if you do get a more calm, sunny spell, it's not going to feel too bad, but some of those showers, as I said, will be pretty pokey indeed. Now, through Saturday evening, it will slowly start to dry up. Some showers will continue for northern areas, but it will turn a bit colder by Sunday morning, with some sunshine to start the day, but it won't last long as more wet and windy weather is on the way early next week.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Thank you, Britain, for helping us reach 8 million followers across social media. Thank you for making us a part of your daily life.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Motorists face a full closure on the M48 between Newhouse and Aust, impacting regional travel. Lane closures caused 10-minute waits and congestion on the M61 northbound at Junction 5 in Bolton. Near Doncaster, expect reduced speeds on the A1M due to a lane closure. Significant delays up to 30 minutes are on the M25 in Thurrock clockwise. In Worcestershire, an accident severely affects M5 northbound traffic with 3 lanes blocked, causing substantial delays. And on the trains, services are disrupted between Stratford-upon-Avon, Leamington Spa and Dorridge. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
It's the greatest cash prize of a Great British giveaway so far. A simply stunning £85,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like, making 2026 your greatest year to date. That could get you that brand new car, extend and improve your home, take you away on that bucket list holiday, or just give you some peace of mind over the coming months. For a chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dewbs & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
All too often, people will be sitting at home watching a press conference live, and they'll hear loads of questions being asked, and they'll be thinking, that's not my question. That's not my concern.
We don't care whose feathers we ruffle. We ask the questions that you want answering.
You're all standing on the street protesting and want to have an open discussion.
My name is Patrick Christie's. I do a show for GB News in the UK. Is it possible to talk to you quickly?
Journalism in this country has been a cosy world full of groupthink until now.
Well, this is the best view ever of Whitehall, looking out across all the tractor drivers of England who've come together to make their point.
Hello, so as you can see, I'm here in Westminster as the protest begins.
Yes, I'm very much in the thick of it.
Look, we're challenging narratives here at GB News, and that's what sets us apart.
Good evening, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching Dewbs & Co. Coming up in the next hour, Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy risks restarting the Brexit row after he refuses to rule out Britain joining the common market with the European Union. Could this be the economic boost that our country needs, or is it just a political pivot to win back left-wing voters? And President Donald Trump has claimed that Europe faces civilizational erasure. A US national security strategy document warns that unless European nations change course on migration, birth rate and free speech, the continent will be unrecognisable in 20 years. Elsewhere, the BBC bias story rumbles on. This time, our national broadcaster has been accused of ambushing Reform's Zia Youssef on Question Time, where he was confronted with questions from asylum seekers in the programme's live audience. And a new survey shows that 4/5 of company owners believe last week's budget was bad for business. Meanwhile, the pub industry warns that just 1 in 10 pubs will be profitable by April. Is it last orders for Britain's boozers? And of course, we'll be bringing you live the results of tonight's World Cup draw, where we'll find out the dates of both England and Scotland in the 2026 World Cup this summer. And joining me for debate tonight, I've got my panel, Reform UK councillor Jamie McIver and Labour councillor Stuart Fawcett. But first, the latest news headlines.
Miriam, thank you. The top stories. Number 10 has dismissed David Lammy's suggestions that it could be beneficial for the UK to look at rejoining or forming a new customs union with the EU. The Deputy Prime Minister argued that leaving the European Union badly damaged the economy and that rejoining the EU customs union would boost economic growth. His comments echo similar arguments from the Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who said that Labour should undo the economic damage done by Brexit, as well as Sir Keir Starmer's very own Chief Economic Advisor. Here's the Prime Minister speaking from South Wales.
Earlier this year we had the first UK-EU summit ever, and we had 10 strands to a closer relationship. So we've totally reset relations with the EU. That's good for our economy, good for defence and security, good for the work that we need to do on energy. And we've transformed, really, in 17 months in office to a country that was looking disinterested in being on the world stage, to a country that's now respected again, and where other countries are looking to us for influence, for advice, for partnerships. You're seeing that with the EU, but of course elsewhere across the world. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to move things forward.
Reform UK's Zia Youssef has criticised the BBC after the broadcaster invited multiple asylum seekers to sit in on Question Time's immigration special. The latest edition of the debate episode was filmed in Dover on the front line of Britain's migrant crisis. Speaking to GB News after the show, the head of policy at Reform UK said he couldn't believe what he was witnessing.
There were 2 illegal migrants who come originally by small boat. As you can see, the BBC were very open about that. How on earth it can be deemed appropriate that people who broke into this country illegally should have a seat at the table in a political discussion about immigration, about illegal immigration on a BBC immigration special is so bewildering.
Meanwhile, Conservative Party Chairman Kevin Hollinrake echoed those comments.
It seems extraordinary that you'd put those people, nothing against those people individually, but those people, the people we are accountable to are the voting public of this country. Question Time and other programmes like it are about us being accountable to the public. There's the people that should be the audience that we're speaking to.
On the issue of BBC Question Time, a spokesperson told GB News Question Time held a special episode in Dover with panellists from across the political spectrum and a local audience with a range of views and experiences, including 2 people with direct experience of the asylum system in the UK who have been granted refugee status. Meanwhile, the government has reopened the Campsfield immigration detention facility near Oxford as part of plans to boost space to house asylum seekers and foreign offenders while they wait to be deported. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer's government is seeking to tackle the backlog of asylum cases and speed up removals. Campsfield has an additional 160 beds after the first phase of refurbishment, with plans for that to later rise to 400. Donald Trump has been given FIFA's new Peace Prize at the World Cup draw. World Football's governing body said it would be given to individuals who have taken exceptional and extraordinary actions for peace. Mr. Trump has long campaigned for a Nobel Peace Prize for his involvement in resolving global conflicts, including the ceasefire agreed between Israel and Hamas in October. Well, the summer's 48-team competition is being held in the US, Canada and Mexico. England and Scotland fans eagerly awaiting their group stage competitors and potential knockout route. Scotland recently made it into the competition for the first time in 28 years. Well, Donald Trump also spoke on the red carpet before today's draw.
I'm here to represent our country in a different sense, but I can tell you I did settle 8 wars and we have a 9th coming. Which nobody's ever done before. But I want to really save lives. I don't need prizes. I need to save lives, and we're saving a lot of lives. I've saved millions and millions of lives, and that's really what I want to do. And I also want to run a great country. And the United States right now is the hottest country anywhere in the world. And 1 year ago it was dead. We had a dead country, and now we have the hottest country anywhere in the world.
And the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children have joined a congregation of celebrities, sporting stars and community stalwarts to celebrate love in all its forms at Christmas. A warning, these images do contain flashing images. The Together at Christmas service is in its 5th year and brings together members of the royal family and 1,600 guests, where the princess and her husband married in 2011. The service featured a host of celebrities, including Kate Winslet. And the service recognised individuals from across the UK who may have dedicated or volunteered their time to others, led initiatives that bring people in their communities together or offered a helping hand to those around them. And those are the latest headlines. For now, more from me in an hour.
Tune in to GB News Radio wherever you are, online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Good evening and welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates. And joining me until 7 o'clock, I've got my panel, the Reform UK Councillor Jamie McIver and Labour Councillor Stuart Fawcett. And of course, please do get your views in at gbnews.com/your say on all the topics that we'll be discussing tonight. Well, let's start with our first story. David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, has refused to rule out reversing Brexit 7 times during an interview yesterday. Yes, Lammy argued that leaving the European Union badly damaged the UK economy and that rejoining the EU customs union would boost economic growth. And earlier this week, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, called for closer economic ties with the EU as a route to economic renewal. Take a listen.
Mr. Speaker, we are getting closer relationships with the EU on a number of fronts, including trade and the economy, because that is good for businesses across our country, has been welcomed by them. We'll continue down that path, but we do have clear red lines in relation to the single market and the customs union. So within those constraints, we will move closer.
So, Stuart, let's start with you. There's clearly a lot of people who regret Brexit. I think 59% of the public, according to YouGov, actually think Brexit, in retrospect, was a bad idea. So it's understandable why Labour might move in this direction. But do you share the view that rejoining the customs union might be good for Britain?
I mean, speaking for myself, I don't regret voting to leave the European Union, but I do regret voting to leave without having a say on the deal we were going to get, which I think has left us at a real disadvantage. I'm hesitant about any future negotiation with the EU. For two reasons. I don't think it's incorrect that in the immediate term it will be good for business for us to have an easier union with the European Union on trade. That was initially what the bloc was set up to do, was a common market. However, as history has taught us, that can be a slippery slope into being brought into other agreements, and I don't think people really want to give that international treaty sort of slope again much more entertainment, especially with the experience we've had. However, when it comes to trading, yes, we do need that better agreement as it is, but we could also miss out on an opportunity to rebuild our own economic base from the UK again, which hadn't been built on the same lines as it had been previously because of the effect of globalisation with those ties with the EU. And I think Britain has an opportunity now to rebuild a manufacturing base here, a stronger domestic economy, and just having a customs union with the EU isn't the answer to our long-term economic prospects.
Jamie, do you think that possibly David Lammy is a bit confused? Because we can't join the customs union if we're not in the EU. It's just not allowed.
Well, something has to be used to describe his complete incompetence as a government secretary of state. So perhaps it is that he's just confused. Maybe he's just been confused all this time. But I think, more pertinently, Starmer wants more closer ties with the European Union. We all know that this government would jump into bed with Brussels in a heartbeat. We know that. They just pretend because they're clinging on to some red wall voters. Although it seems like with this sort of communication, they actually don't care about the red wall at all. They've given up. They're going after the Lib Dem places in places like Cornwall and Surrey. But what's very interesting is Starmer wants closer ties with the European Union. I can think of some things that we could align ourselves with the European Union on. We are one of the only countries in the European Union that doesn't use DNA to check the age of asylum seekers when they're going to children's services, for example. So as Sarah Pochin, one of our fantastic MPs, said, why don't you look at some debate about the use of face coverings? So I think there's actually some things we could be doing to be more aligned with our European neighbours. Why is it that somebody gets refused asylum in 6 different countries and then finds themselves in Britain? Why are we not following some of the procedures that those other European Union countries are doing? So I think when it comes to the economy, one thing that Starmer isn't, what Labour is not, they are not entrepreneurial, they are not innovative, they don't get business. Brexit was an opportunity. The politicians in Parliament at the time, many of them were just sulking and were not having the national interest at heart, I'm sure you'll agree. And actually what we have got now is a government that hasn't got the vision of Brexit, hasn't got the vision that Nigel has, that some of the backbench Tories had at the time, the Spartan MPs. And actually, when I voted to leave the European Union, I thought of empire. I thought of getting back to a Britain that did trade with the entire world. Yes, we have trade deals, but we're not going far enough. So I think Starmer just lacks entrepreneurial oomph, and his whole government doesn't get it.
Do you think Stuart has a point, though? People voted to leave the EU, but it was very unclear during that referendum exactly how that would be done. And we didn't, for example, have a referendum on, do you want to be outside the EU but still in a customs union? Do you want to be, a complete no-deal Brexit? There was no democratic mandate for the type of deal, was there?
Well, I was very young at the time, and I remember passionately voting to basically cut any ties with the European Union whatsoever. For me, that also meant actually the ECHR, to be quite honest with you. That's something that I thought back then. But look, I don't think we need a referendum on these sorts of things. And we can't have a referendum on anything. But the country's direction was away from the European Union, goodbye to the European Union, hello to the world, which includes European Union nations. And this is where the Lib Dems look so stupid, because they act as though we've just built a wall around our island, if only, because then the boats would stop. We actually have got them on our doorstep. We have a government that seems to be accepting that the European Union wants to play games with us and not actually do proper relationships with the European Union when it comes to the economy. They're on our doorstep. We do trade the European Union. Every single florist in this country is buying flowers from Holland for this Christmas, for people's centrepieces on their tables. We do trade with the European Union. There is an opportunity to do more.
Although it is smaller importers like florists that have actually had the most difficulty with the Brexit deal. But Stuart, do you think there's a temptation for the government, given that Britain's economy is struggling, that lots of people think the economy is doing badly? Do you think there is a temptation to blame that on Brexit, that actually a move towards Europe could be a political panacea, even if not an economic one?
I think there's a few different aspects that we need to look at, especially given some of the things that Jamie's pointed out there, is this short-term or long-term view. In the short term, especially for smaller businesses that are having tariffs, etc., imposed, and that has a real impact on their margins, I imagine it might be to say, yes, absolutely, let's go back. But there isn't really any going back, realistically. We've made this decision and it's binding. But there's some things, Jamie, you've mentioned there, I think are important to draw a line with, which is the fact that European Union is a union and not all those states can therefore make individual deals as nations with Britain because of the terms of the EU. Part of that term as well was the Dublin Agreement, which you were talking about, with how citizens, certain refugees or immigrants have made applications in several countries. But actually, because of that deal, we had a better sharing. Now, why didn't we have a similar deal coming out with Brexit? That's a frustration of mine personally. And you mentioned about DNA testing for immigrants coming over. Well, actually, now we're introducing AI facial recognition technology, which is enabling that as it is. So that's already something that's happening and should be happening as part of a fair system.
Looking at people's wrinkles? Come on. Nothing beats DNA testing. I'm sorry, that is not an answer to that solution.
I'm not a DNA or AI facial recognition tech.
Neither am I, but
that is now being
knows that you can't judge someone on how they look.
No, but I think that there's a bit of science there. But let's just come back to where we're asking, which is about business. You talked about empire, Jamie. We have this fantastic union ourselves, which is called the Commonwealth, which is the greatest legacy that the British Empire has left us. And I think there is exponential potential there for that to have a greater economic impact on our joint future. And I would like to see that embraced more now that we're out of the European Union. However, just to say we're going to cut ties with a whole host of countries that have a functioning joint economy, I don't think is a sensible, rational thing, despite the fact that I wanted Britain to be more sovereign. So I think we need to have a sensible conversation that makes sure we don't slide back into a situation where we're going back into the EU, but also is robust and fair and takes into account smaller businesses so that we can have a balanced option on the table with all of those things taken into account.
Jamie, I think Nigel Farage has said that he doesn't think Britain got a good deal. It wasn't the best deal that we could have had. If Reform is in government in 4 years' time, will they try to reopen this deal, renegotiate, and do you think the EU would give a Reform government a good deal?
Well, no one in this country is more passionate about Brexit than Nigel Farage, and I think it's actually right that the British people give Nigel the opportunity to right all the wrongs of, frankly, politicians that never believed in Brexit. They believed in the idea of being elected if they said, oh, I'm a Brexiteer, but they actually never believed in Brexit. I remember being at a school called the Anglo-European School. I believed in Brexit so much I actually got in trouble for believing in Brexit. My school's logo was the European Union flag. I believed in it so much, and we need people in Parliament that really believe in Brexit. You know, fortunately, the Tory party did have a few backbenchers that did, or I dread to think where the country would have ended up. I think it is right that the country give Nigel that opportunity, and I think a Reform government will take full advantage of the Brexit opportunities. And like you say, the Commonwealth, I'm so passionate about the Commonwealth, those incredible countries. And you know what? The Commonwealth countries love us. They want to do more with us. You never hear Starmer talk about it. Why? Because they don't believe in it.
Well, coming up, Europe risks civilizational erasure unless it dramatically reduces migration. That's the warning from President Donald Trump. Stay with us.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewbs, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact is Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Bold. They are under no illusion. Ray, are you a human trafficker? Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline.
Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock, I've got Jamie McIver and Stuart Fawcett. Now, President Donald Trump has warned that Europe risks civilizational erasure unless it dramatically reduces migration. Well, a new US national security strategy document signed off by the president claims that the continent could become unrecognisable in 20 years or less if current trends continue, with some nations potentially becoming majority non-European. Now, this paper, which sets out the Trump administration's global priorities, also argues that Europe's migration policies are fueling strife, censorship of free speech and suppression of political opposition. So, panel, do we think that Europe is facing a civilizational erasure, as Trump warns? Jamie, let's start with you. I mean, firstly, what a marked difference in Trump compared to the Joe Biden administration, who were uninterested in Europe, certainly didn't see any kind of civilizational challenge. And now we've got this Trump government, Vance particularly, openly concerned about what's happening in Europe. Do you welcome that?
Well, I think what you can call this is an upgrade in presidency and an upgrade in administration. And I think Trump actually feels the feeling of the British people more than our own Prime Minister does, because actually, you know, I'm from Essex. When I canvass, I knock on people's doors. As they say, they've recently moved to this part of Essex. And when you ask them why, they say because where they live now is unrecognisable to the place that they moved into. And that's not just a conversation about immigration. It's the entire cultural dynamics. It's the fact that your children at Easter don't get to have the Easter celebrations that I would have had when I was at school. It's the fact that you see graffiti all over every single bit of public transport. It's the fact that you see in places like Whitechapel a translation, not into a language on the near continent, a translation of the name of the station. It's the fact that you go through somewhere like the East End of London and you see places that you once would have played as a child, which my grandparents frequently tell me, and these places are now so dangerous that you can't walk there in the daytime, let alone nighttime. So the entire way of life of the British people is under threat. Too many people aren't talking about it, and it's happening across Europe. I think the scene that horrified me and has made me so determined politically was the horrific video I saw of Whitechapel, packed full of people basically chanting that English people weren't welcome anymore. And I think what we are seeing is a horrific takeover. It's scary. It's scary for English people. It's scary for British people. But it's also happening everywhere in Europe.
I mean, Jamie, that's right, isn't it? Western Europe particularly has seen such enormous immigration levels over the last 20 years that really Europe will be, Trump's right, it'll be unrecognisable in 20 years.
We've had a serious evolution within a generation of demographics within, let's talk about European Union states. Obviously, there's free movement within there. And Britain before Brexit was part of that free movement. So it's had a proportional impact upon it. Also, we've had a large imprint upon the world, and many people have an identity with Britain, and therefore they've come here through various different routes over the last sort of 80 years. Just want to come back to what President Trump there is saying, and I think President Trump seasons 2 is really looking up at the minute, whether we compare it with President Biden or not. But a lot of impact on the world there, and what he's seeing here, what I believe he wants to protect, is fundamentally the basis of what we call NATO. I think the Americans want to see a safe and secure Europe, and part of that is about their cultural identity. And perhaps what he's seeing is a shift in demographics that people perhaps wouldn't normally attribute to European identity across different nationalities. That's now being impacted by those changes and within itself because of the nature of the European Union. But I think fundamentally the good reason is that America wants Europe as an ally, and their strategic assessment is that going to continue? Is the basis of our agreement, especially with NATO, going to continue if the culture moves in that direction? I believe it is, and I believe it is because I think states like Britain and other states in the European Union are capable of having robust conversations about cultural change.
No, we're not.
Well,
you get locked away for it.
I think that's a little bit extreme, because I think we can have cultural conversations where we say, actually, diversity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, there is a barrier at which we need to say, I'm sorry, this particular culture is not compatible with British culture or French culture or German culture.
But you see, there's hardly any voices on the left saying that. And I completely agree with what you're saying. I was at a conference in Brussels yesterday and on Wednesday, which is a right-wing conference, but talking openly about these issues in a debate that perhaps was being shut down a couple of years ago. But I think it is much more on the agenda now. But it's all very well to talk about it. What are we going to do about it?
Well, look, the leader of my party, Nigel Farage, is regularly talking about this and having grown-up conversations, and the Prime Minister likes to call him racist. He gets shouted at in a House of Commons, all sorts of things, and he can't even finish his sentence. We can't have robust debate about this. We can't have grown-up conversations about immigration, the fact that our communities are becoming unrecognisable, because you're immediately shut down. As a councillor, I get investigated for my tweets about it. It's just absurd, because I might dare to say that there are some cultures in the world that are not compatible with Britain, because that is true. Let's not forget that within 8 days of an illegal migrant being in a town where I live, a young girl was sexually assaulted, and in court the man said, the defendant said, where I'm from, the rules aren't as strict. This is factual, but people are not able to have this conversation because, firstly, and this is the worst thing when it comes to freedom of speech, people are too scared. As a councillor, how many times do my residents say, I know I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm a bit concerned for what's going on with immigration. There's nothing wrong with that, but unfortunately, people on the left, I'm not suggesting you personally, people on the left have made it so toxic. People like me get called a fascist because I dare to say that immigration's got out of control.
Stuart,
I think the issue where this has come from is that for so long, the conversation of immigration immediately has been rejected out of hand. So to have a reasonable, moderate view and a concern around immigration has been rejected by mainstream politics for too long, and therefore that conversation has been taken in by other people with other motives. So that definitely has happened. On what you were saying there about freedom of speech, I think it's very important that we retain our freedom of expression. We have a different system to that of America, and obviously in the president's eyes, they would like to see freedom of speech without any curtailment, essentially. However, we do have protections in place because of freedom of expression rather than freedom of speech in the American sense. And that does prevent incitement and other elements which, whilst they don't automatically lead to violent action, they essentially load the gun in order to do it.
It's different.
And that, exactly. So we have a cultural difference, but we have values in common.
Can I just move away from immigration for a second, because it's not just immigration that Trump highlighted. He also talked about low birth rates in Europe. Now, America is also suffering from declining birth rates, but in some European countries now, we've got total fertility rates of 1.1 or 1.2 children per woman, which basically means that in a few generations' time, native European populations will have almost collapsed. Even if we solved immigration tomorrow, we're still looking at the end of Europe. What are we going to do about collapsing birth rates?
Well, and this is something that made me believe that actually our policy on the two-child benefit cap was appropriate for British natives of our country, because what we have got to think about, what sort of army are we going to have in the future? What sort of country are we going to have when we can't talk about some basic cultural thing?
But that's a great argument, but it's nowhere near enough. I mean, look, Hungary spending 5% of their GDP every year on huge tax breaks for women who have children, way more than anything that Reform are currently considering, and yet they've seen a very slight uptick in their birth rate.
Look, I don't think you can force nature. I don't think that's possible. But what I think is important that we don't sit here thinking if only we had done something. So I think if there is an apparatus that can encourage more people to have children, whether that's affordability and many other things, just the fact you can't buy a house where I live for less than £1 million. This is that's big for a big family. So there's a lot of other things, and I think we've got to say in 10 years' time, did we do everything we possibly could?
Yeah, but you talk about changing nature there. I don't think it's about changing nature. I think it's about influencing our culture more positively. GB News readers will read today about an article I've written on the Great British Family, which is fundamentally in decline, sadly. And that was at one stage a thing that Britain was held in high regard for, was because of our social fabric made up of very strong, cohesive family units. And I don't think we should be coy about that, and it has faced a decline. I think our birth rate's about 1.4 at the moment. It's very low. And there are several cultural factors which intertwine with economic factors, which make it really difficult for young people to go and have children. I understand the argument sometimes is, well, if you can't afford to have children, don't have them. And increasingly, that is now what is happening. And I think that is, as you say, there are plenty of things where the state intervenes and it provides support. And I think it's appropriate to ensure that children are enabled to be welcomed into this world without threat of poverty in order to give them the best start in life. And I think there is a real opportunity now to influence Great British Family once again and rebuild culture from that.
But we are looking at radical action if we're going to reverse the decline. I mean, the birth rate's been declining since the 1970s. It's showing no sign of turning around.
Look at the radical action that has actually changed the way we operate as a society. I think working from home being continued after COVID is one of the worst things ever. You're not going to meet...
It's actually a good thing for young mums, actually. Well, it might be a bad thing for businesses.
It might be after you've had a baby, for sure, but I don't think you're going to meet your future wife, who you're going to have children with, on a Zoom call. A lot of people used to meet. I mean, I look at my parents' generation, a lot of my friends' parents, they met at work in a city or something. That's not happening now. We've got a culture now, everyone's obsessed with their mobile phones, they're obsessed with working from home, and I think that's a big culture problem we've got to look at as well.
Now, this pronatalism argument was one I'm very much interested in, but it's very difficult to find anybody on the left who will talk about it. It's fantastic that you are. Josh Simons, the Labour minister, he talks about this a lot. But hardly any Labour MPs are willing to engage on this issue. They think that somehow helping women to have children, which they say they do want, is somehow, I don't know, a right-wing issue. Why is that?
I think we've had a capture of advancement of certain rights from the left's point of view for a long time, and I think perhaps some people are worried that that is going to curtail that, essentially. But I think we need to talk about equality and women's equality in that sense, which is... and it doesn't always have to be that this is a woman's place at all, but that... managing a home and a family is an extremely difficult thing to do that perhaps myself I wouldn't be particularly great at either. But I have been a foster carer before, and I've looked after children, and it is, I'm really sad to say, it's a vocation that is sadly in decline, despite the need and demand for it. But it requires a lot of skills, a lot of management skills, that actually in the long term probably benefit your career quite well, that you might be not exposed to in the longer term. But I think we need to really value again the fact of family cohesiveness and management, and the fact that that is what the world of work can be centred around.
And I do feel, and I'm all for empowering women to do whatever they want, and I don't think women should be restricted in any way, but some women do just want to be really amazing mums at home, and why should that not be allowed? Yeah. We've bred now. If I was to come out and say I think we need to have more women at home looking after their children, I would be attacked, or probably will be for saying it, as I just have. But actually, there's a lot of women that would love to do that and just focus on bringing up their children to have effectively a perfect life, and why shouldn't we have that?
Well, every year the DfE does a survey about childcare, and every year 75–80% of women with children under 4 say they'd love to spend more time with their children if only they could afford to do that. Now, I'm going to interrupt because we can bring you an update from the 2025 World Cup draw. This is the World Cup next year. England has been drawn into Group L. So I hope that means something to you at home. We'll keep you updated on what teams they'll be playing in summer 2026. So let's hope it's not Germany, because we always seem to lose. Well, coming up, the BBC is accused of ambushing Reform's Zia Youssef on Question Time, confronting him live with questions from asylum seekers in the audience. Was this a fair debate or a bit of a stitch-up? Stick with us.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Further wet and windy weather likely in Greece and Turkey during the course of the weekend. Some heavy downpours, particularly across southern parts of Turkey, extending into Cyprus. Also, as I mentioned, gusty winds. The breeze coming down from the north, bringing a cool feel to Italy, but should see plenty of sunshine here. Same goes for Mallorca and much of the east coast of Spain. If you want temperatures over 20 degrees, you need to be heading further south. Some fine warm conditions in the Canaries. Those heavy showers only slowly easing this weekend in Greece.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. This weekend is looking unsettled with heavy downpours. The only good news is, though, it's staying relatively mild. That's because we've got southwesterly winds, but that is where the rain is coming from. So some very wet weather pushing into western areas through the rest of this evening, and that will move into the north and east overnight tonight, bringing some snow to the high ground of the Grampians. Elsewhere, though, a lot of rain. There will likely be quite a lot of water on the roads through your travel this evening and into tomorrow morning. Once the main rain band clears, that gives way to some heavy and blustery showers, and with strong winds overnight, temperatures will be holding up above freezing just about everywhere. But it does mean we are going to continue to see some further rainfall throughout Saturday. Some quite strong winds actually moving in across eastern areas of Scotland, and with the rain continuing to feed in, we could see some disruption here across eastern areas of Aberdeenshire. Further west, we've got some heavy showers across northern England. Northern Ireland seeing a slightly drier day, but western areas of Wales, the south of Wales in particular, parts of Devon and Cornwall will see some quite gusty winds throughout Saturday. And these showers do bring a risk of hail and thunderstorms on Saturday. There will be some dry weather around, though, actually. Once the main rain clears actually in the north, much of Scotland will see relatively dry weather, and there will be some sunshine here and there across central areas. And as I said, it is on the milder side of things, 10 or 11 degrees. Some areas seeing 12 degrees actually through Saturday afternoon. So not too bad, but definitely a pretty unsettled weekend. A cold start, though, on Sunday morning, and then the next band of rain bringing another spell of heavy downpours throughout Sunday afternoon across the country, particularly actually this time across northern areas moves in. Now that will clear for some respite on Monday, but the next batch of wet and, for some of us, very windy weather arrives on Tuesday.
Thank you, Britain, for making us the fastest growing news website in the UK. We're truly humbled, and we couldn't have done it without you.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. Motorists face challenges on the M46 eastbound with restricted lanes. The M48 is closed both ways from Junction 2 Newhouse to Junction 1 Aust. In Leicestershire, a collision on the M6 northbound between the A14 and Junction 1 has closed 2 lanes. Worcestershire's M5 northbound has 3 of 4 lanes closed. In Windsor and Maidenhead, issues exist on the A404M southbound with 1 lane shut due to an accident. And on the trains, disruptions affect Chiltern Railways and cross-country services between Stratford-upon-Avon, Leamington Spa and Dorridge. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock. I've got Reform UK councillor Jamie McIver and Labour councillor Stuart Fawcett. Now, the BBC scandal rumbles on because critics have questioned the BBC after the broadcaster invited multiple asylum seekers to sit in on Question Time's immigration special. Well, the latest edition of the debate episode was filmed in Dover, which of course is ground zero of Britain's migrant crisis. Let's remind ourselves of this.
To the man in the white shirt, now I know you came over on a small boat.
Am I right about that?
Yeah.
What's your response to what you're hearing? Because obviously everyone is talking about people like you.
Leaving the convention doesn't just affect the migrants in Northern Ireland and damage our security cooperation.
Let me ask you about your situation. I mean, since we were talking about immigration in this programme today, we thought, and we would be talking about people like you, we would see if there were, 2 or 3, 4 people who wanted to come along who are in that situation.
Well, after that Question Time episode, Zia Youssef joined GB News' late edition last night, where he slammed the BBC.
2 illegal migrants who come originally by small boat. As you can see, the BBC were very open about that. How on earth it can be deemed appropriate that people who broke into this country illegally should have a seat at the table in a political discussion about immigration? About illegal immigration on a BBC immigration special is so bewildering.
Well, panel, let's have your thoughts on this. Stuart, the BBC is massively under fire. But they seem to be walking into these crises. I mean, what an extraordinary thing to do, to ambush Zia Youssef with some men who'd come across on small boats to ask him about reforms policy.
I mean, perhaps they've seen his performances recently and maybe thought, well, maybe we can take it. But look. I think the BBC has a very high duty to make sure that there is no bias, it's fair, and it gives a fair argument, fair consideration to the debate. That is what it holds itself to. I think what we need to remember is that all the impact of our policy has an impact upon real people. And we consider the breadth of debate across people generally in Question Time. I don't know what kind of notice was given to Zia or any of the other panellists, so it was specifically aimed.
10 minutes, but it's obviously been planned for a long time.
Of course, I imagine there's been some prep work, and that people should always have a fair warning about what's about to be going on. However, I think we do need to hear voices of life experience from all sides of the debate on this one. And if you're creating policy on something, I think it's a little bit haughty to say, how dare they speak to me like that? We should have a robust conversation about immigration. We need immigration controls, and we need a solution to the issue as it is. However, I don't think that means blocking out those voices that have perhaps had some real life experience of it.
What are your thoughts?
Well, listen, Zia Youssef is one of the most impressive people in British politics right now. He's a complete genius, but it doesn't take a genius to work out that what happened last night was just absolutely outrageous. And, isn't it a damning indictment on our country that in Kent, to make the audience be inclusive of the area, it has to include some illegal migrants that have come to the country.
I think it was more inclusive of the debate than the area,
but I think that's their justification. But what I think it does demonstrate is it demonstrates that the BBC really don't get it, and they deserve to be in the oblivion, because you cannot offend the British people, the people that get up in the morning, alarm clock Britain, that get up, go to work, pay their taxes, do the right thing, who are seeing the huge injustice that there is at the moment when it comes to the fact that these men are put in hotels and for a long time in the communities like where I live. I mean, I helped just this week as a counsellor a single mother who's heavily pregnant, who's in the most horrific hotel. I mean, it was just absolutely awful. And I couldn't help but think that literally just walking distance from our civic offices, there are a load of unvetted men just sitting there like the man on the TV. And what are we supposed to do now? If Question Time's being filmed near a prison, should we go and get someone who's been convicted of domestic abuse to go and appear on the panel on a women's safety topic? It's wrong.
This isn't the only accusation of bias that's been made at the BBC this week. The use of language by Emma Barnett on the Today programme, where she said that Nigel Farage had a relationship with Hitler, which is obviously an absurd thing to say. But do you think that actually the right strategy for reform is just to rise above it, to answer the questions on policy, to keep going, rather than to react to what the BBC are trying to do?
Well, that's all reform ever do. But the problem is you can't have grown-up conversations with people that can't behave like grown-ups.
But Jamie, you've just asked for the BBC to be sent into oblivion. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's quite...
Well, I think it's a taxation without representation. I think the whole thing's
Would you like
wrong.
to see, if reform comes to power, is the BBC safe?
I think the BBC, and I think Reform UK made a position very, very clear on the BBC that we don't think there should be a licence fee. I think it's totally wrong. And in fact, you know what? I don't think you need a reform government to make that happen. The market is soon going to dictate. People will not watch the BBC. They don't want to watch it. It's at the moment. And you know, if you think about how the BBC talk about, for example, the women of Epping who have been peacefully protesting, if you think about how the BBC, that awful question that Richard Tice had given to him, you know, these people, they should be sacked if the BBC actually had any
But they've just sacked a lot of executives because of the issue over impartiality. I mean, that does happen. The BBC has a very high standard of broadcasting, which many others try and hold themselves to a similar account.
Why is there
balance.
500,000 subscribers every year?
But I think you're looking there purely about market desire for their entertainment, whereas there's a huge value in our nation having a national broadcaster in order to have the closest as possible to impartiality as possible.
Impartial.
Of course.
It would be a valuable asset if it worked.
At least we can hold it to account on these standards publicly and have the debate, and that's what it enables us to have.
But you can't have the public debate when you've got idiots like Ed Davey trying to make some kind of crazy, obsessive, like, love story with the BBC. Just look at the questions that Nigel Farage was asked.
But it enables this to happen. If we have a purely market-driven broadcaster, or we lose the BBC altogether, we won't be able to have this diversity of discourse that actually makes us have a real rich
free
market
we
economy.
are going to have to leave it there. I think we can conclude that BBC would be safe in the hands of the Lib Dems. On the issue of BBC Question Time, a spokesperson told GB News, as immigration continues to be a primary concern for people in the UK, Question Time held a special episode in Dover with panellists from across the political spectrum and a local audience with a range of views and experiences. Over 20 audience members asked questions and contributed to the debate, including 2 people with direct experience of the asylum system in the UK who have been granted refugee status. Now, we can bring you another update from the World Cup draw. England are going to be playing Croatia in the group stages of the World Cup in the summer in America. Well, coming up, join us for the Dewberry Tavern as we raise a glass to the small businesses up and down the country. Stay with us.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, this is Dewbs & Co with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie is here. GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dewberry, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
Only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Miriam Cates, and keeping me company until 7 o'clock here in the Dewberry Tavern. I've got my panel, Jamie McIver and Stuart Fawcett. Now, as I said, it is the Dewberry Tavern. You can see we're at the pub. Friday night, raise a glass with us at home. Cheers to you. We've got the elves helping out with your drinks. Very, very good. Well, tomorrow is Small Business Saturday, encouraging shoppers to buy locally on their high street. Well, the campaign comes at a crucial moment because new figures reveal that the great British institution of the pub is still reeling after the budget, with 1 in 10 pubs expected to be unprofitable by April. And it's not just pubs feeling the strain. Other small businesses have also been hit following last week's business rates decision, which has affected the hospitality sector. We'll come to that in a minute. Oh, no, we're going to come to that now. We haven't quite got more football news, but we'll come to that when we do. Stuart,
no football in this pub at the moment.
No football in this pub. Football is one thing to keep pubs going, isn't it? But, I mean, the budget, obviously, so much controversy before the budget, Stuart, but it does seem to be unravelling in its aftermath in terms of its impact on small business. Do you think the Labour Party recognises that?
I think if we look at pubs in terms of small businesses, I mean, I've run my own small business before and it's difficult. When you have people to pay and overheads to pay, you know, it keeps you awake at night. So I really get it. On pubs in particular, I think for too long now, we've got it wrong in several areas. And that to expect one budget to magically make it viable again is probably a little bit, a bit out of the realms of possibility. However, there are things that we can all do in order to help our local. So I think when we looking back first, duty on alcohol is fundamentally probably the wrong way round. So having very cheap alcohol in the supermarkets and excessively more duty on alcohol in pubs has really hit our culture and our social hubs in these places which pubs keep them together. And perhaps if that had been the other way round a generation ago, we might have seen more responsible drinking and more sustainable pubs, essentially. However, that hasn't happened. The other issue is that a lot of these pubs were started when business rates were in their infancy, and the way that they were rated was completely different. Their turnover, everything fundamentally was different about the operation of the business. And at the moment, they're not going to continue to get the same relaxation of rates as there was from COVID, because obviously that was a short-term measure. So there are legitimate concerns about this, but I think what we have seen in the last few years is where pubs are moving more towards cooperatives and being community-owned, and there is opportunity there with new laws that are coming in to help cooperatives to actually renew the pub industry to make it more of a community-centred.
I'll bring you in just a sec, Jamie, but do you think that there might be a U-turn if indeed only 1 in 10 pubs proves to be profitable come April? Given the U-turns on the winter fuel allowance, for example, do you think this is something that Rachel Reeves might row back on?
I mean, I'd be very careful about speculating on that in particular. However, I don't think this government wants to see businesses fail.
I'll bring you in a minute, Jamie. We're going to Scotland because we're turning back to the World Cup draw, and Scotland have been drawn. They now know 2 of the teams they'll be facing in next year's World Cup. We can now speak with GB News' Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, who's in Glasgow. Tony, break the news.
Yeah, well, Scotland, it looks like, has been put into Group C with Brazil and Morocco. This will bring many a bad dream flashback to Scotland fans because, of course, it was in 1998 that we were in a group with Brazil as well. But on the flip side, we're going to see some really world-class football on the Scotland team put against. So, you know, so far, still 1 team to be drawn from this group. But I think Scotland fancies their chances against Morocco and Brazil. Brazil's quite exciting. I think just turn to my pal Roy just now. Roy, how are you happy with Brazil and Morocco?
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely.
Does it bring flashbacks to 1998?
It certainly does, yeah. Pretty
obviously it's not the opening game, but looking forward to it. Yeah.
It's still earlier in the tournament, right? So we'll still get a good chance.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And do you know much about Morocco?
Oh, easy.
Right, well, there we go. If Scotland obviously manages to get a strong third place finish, then maybe there's a chance that we can finally break that seal and get through to the knockout stages. But it's been a really long wait here for this moment. But I have to say, with Brazil in our group, I think we can be quite happy that at the very least it's not going to be an easy ride, but we're definitely going to see some world-class football. Just 6 months to go now.
Thank you. Jamie, are you a football fan at all?
I'm a big football family. I'm not going to pretend I know anything about world football, but I think from the teams that I just heard there, they are. I'm obviously rooting for Scotland.
Yes, but Scotland versus Brazil.
Yeah,
look,
let's just hope it's raining.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And it could be good news for pubs because the more matches, more people go to the pub. We didn't have time to talk to you about businesses. Just very briefly, we've got hardly any time left, but what would Reform do about this business?
Well, look, Reform just set up small businesses for reform. We're very passionate. We are the party of small businesses. But I think the problem we've got in our high streets and our pubs is anything the government do to attack people's ability to spend money impacts the high street and the pubs first. And I speak to pubs in Ongar, where I'm a councillor, and they tell me it's really challenging. So tomorrow, everybody, go to your local pub, go to your local high street, spend all the money you can.
Brilliant. And England are going to play Croatia and Panama, we're hearing. So that's the good news for today. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for my panel for a fantastic discussion. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. And don't forget to support your small businesses tomorrow. Up next is Lee Anderson. Have a great evening.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. This weekend is looking unsettled with heavy downpours. The only